What's going on, guys? This is Rob, and we are back with Invincible Iron Man, which you guys absolutely loved. So this takes place both before the attack on Krakoa and then after the attack on Krakoa, just kind of something to keep in mind. But the thing about this is that with Tony Stark's entire business basically being taken over by the rabid anti-mutant guy Fei Long, which of course a lot of the guys have made reference to the guy from Street Fighter, which is a fair synopsis to come up with, right? A fair belief to come up with, that Tony Stark no longer has control of his own company. And even his own Stark tech, the Iron Man suits, those all belong to Stark Industries. Because remember, one of the things that Tony Stark had done over the years is that in building the Iron Man suits, they were all business ventures, right? They were all like tax deductible things, which means they're products of the company itself. And so legally, he has to hand them over. Now, what ends up going on is that around this time, Captain Krakoa, whose identity we still don't know, but is effectively associated with the mutant population, had launched an attack on Washington, D.C. So the Avengers themselves responded. If you guys recall the video that we did at the very beginning of Fall of X when the attack was launched, and like Rogue and Captain America and those guys just took off from the Hellfire Gala, this is what they were responding to. But by the time Tony Stark gets there, the fight's more or less done, right? Things are effectively over. So you do have Rogue and you do have Captain America, they're kind of tending to their own business, and then Stark starts to realize that the Sentinels are on the prowl again. Now this takes place right when the attack on Krakoa happens, right? So they're sort of happening simultaneously. And so that's why when Stark gets here and he realizes that the Sentinel has tracked down Emma Frost from the X-Men alongside Wilson Fisk Kingpin, that it goes to attack them both. Now, a little bit of an aside here because it's not overly important, but it does provide context. Kingpin technically has residency on the mutant nation of Krakoa. No, he's not a mutant, but he is married to Typhoid Mary. And Typhoid Mary, Mary Walker herself, is a mutant. So it's by extension of that marriage that he can be granted citizenship. Now, the reality is the Quiet Council could have just nullified that. They could have said, we don't care that you're married. You do not get to be part of the inner council or even part of Krakoa itself. But the reality here is that Wilson Fisk, despite the fact that he's a villain, is a powerful ally to have on your side. Not even just because of what he's capable of on a personal level, but because of all the contacts that he has. But because of all the contacts he has in the criminal underworld, in the government, and so on and so forth. So he's the guy you want on your side. Up until that point, he was the Black King of the Hellfire Club. We'll talk more about that here in a little while. But Emma Frost immediately goes on the response here, right? Like literally Iron Man tells her, I warned you guys in the last Hellfire Gala, things were only going to get worse and none of you believed me. And that's an accurate statement, right? Not the current Hellfire Gala where everything popped off, but the one from last year, right? That's one of the things we talked about in that story. Ever since Jonathan Hickman took over the X-Men, every year Marvel releases a comic called the Hellfire Gala. And either it's a reshuffling of the X-Men roster or some kind of new team is created, but whatever it is, you end up seeing a kind of shift in the status quo. During the previous Hellfire Gala, Iron Man warned Emma Frost and the rest of the mutants on Krakoa, really the Quiet Council, that them acting in this way, which is to say creating their own mutant nation and so on and so forth, it would make people fearful. Right? Humanity would respond in the most predictable way. Now, a lot of people you could argue could have seen this coming, but one of the things to remember about Tony Stark, he's a futurist. He's always looking to the horizon. He's always looking at what's coming down the road. That combined with his intelligence basically put him in a position where he's like, I'm surprised nobody else sees this. I'm surprised nobody else really believes this. It's only a matter of time before humanity launches a strike against the mutant population. And whether by their hubris or whatever the case is, they effectively ignored him, right? They just kind of blew him off. And now it's all coming home to roost. Now his words are coming true. Now what's cool is the Sentinels momentarily just kind of send Tony Stark flying, right? They momentarily overpower him. And the response of Emma as she's talking directly to Fei Long, who she assumes can see her through the Sentinels themselves. And she says like, you're going to regret attacking the entirety of the X-Men and the full mutant population. And the response of Fei Long is like, well, I mean, I don't really feel regretful, not even a little bit, right? Like it's just, you know, it's just how things were going to go. But understand, Emma Frost, as she's been depicted in more recent years in Marvel Comics, is just like the ultra super attractive, high class, ritzy girl who doesn't like getting her hands dirty. No. That's just way Marvel's done her character recently. You go back and you look at Emma Frost in like the 80s and the 90s. No, son, she has no qualms in getting her hands dirty. And when it comes down to it, Emma Frost is a chick you want on your side. One, because she's an Omega level telepath, right? She's one of the most powerful telepaths in existence in the Marvel universe. And two, once she goes into her diamond form, she's basically indestructible. And that's exactly what happens. Granted, she can't like fly or anything like that, but she can certainly take these Sentinels apart piece by piece by knocking out their feet and then knocking out their knees. And as they collapse, taking them out, right? It's like Wolverine attacking one of these things. The funny thing is Stark has his own plan. And what he tells her is you being here is just going to be you getting in the way. I'm not saying that because I don't really need your help or you're going to be useless or anything. It's just, I've got a plan and you're going to ultimately be a distraction. So in effect, Emma Frost basically leaves and then states that she's going to go on the hunt to try to find any X-Men who are surviving. So those of you guys who are wondering what was going on with Emma Frost at the time in the immediate aftermath of Fall of X, this is it, because I know a lot of you guys are asking that question, so I figured we'd answer it here. Now, the funny thing is where she would have just gone about and done her own thing, Tony Stark is attacked by two of these Sentinels and they're both enough to overpower her. So almost immediately when he said, I have a plan, the plan goes awry. And Emma Frost responds using her telepathy because there's no indication that he's alive here. Now, you could kind of say that Emma Frost would dismiss it, right? And just say, oh, you know, he'll be fine. But remember, with the mutant population under attack by humanity, allies are few and far between. And Tony Stark is a friend of the X-Men, right? If for no other reason than the fact that they share a common enemy in the form of Fei Long. But Iron Man himself, even during the events of like Avengers versus X-Men and that kind of stuff from back in the day, that he didn't necessarily see the X-Men as straight up bad guys, and helping them where he could, when he could, that was the effective thing that he was trying to do. So once Emma Frost realizes he could die here, they would lose one of their most powerful allies. So entering into the mind of Tony Stark, she literally takes over his body and then she starts controlling the Iron Man suit, which is dope. Now, this is not new. Right, this is how Marvel explained to us that back in the day, Iceman is an Omega level mutant. When Emma Frost took over his body and then basically realized just how powerful he could actually be, this is how we learned that Jubilee could be an Omega level mutant, that her little plasmoid things that look like fireworks are actually her detonating matter. And it's only a matter of time before she can detonate matter on the atomic or subatomic scale, basically create nuclear explosions with her power, possibly even blow up a whole planet. So again, like it's one of these instances where Emma taking over the body of somebody is part and parcel to her character. We don't learn anything new about Tony Stark here, right? It's not like, actually, Tony Stark, you're a mutant and your power is to just be really smart like Forge, right? I know they're doing that with Miss Marvel and the hand wavy stuff that comes along with it, but what ends up happening is that even in this moment where she's able to offer some kind of aid, it's only just enough to allow Tony Stark to kind of come to. And then in turn, the Sentinels capture her and they're gonna kill her on the spot. Right, they're about to annihilate her, but the response of Stark is, stop, I surrender. Because at the end of the day, Fei Long is really going after Tony Stark, and a lot of it's just pride, right? That's really all it is. And Tony Stark realizes that. He knows that it's the pride of Fei Long that he's really preying on here, right? If I can get Tony Stark and I can get the last Iron Man suit, well, then I can just go and grab Emma Frost at some future point in time, right? And so what this does is it grants kind of a momentary reprieve in this fight, where basically Emma Frost's life is saved. She intends to stay fighting. She won't leave. And so the response of Iron Man is to basically have the suit encase Emma Frost and then take off, literally taking her away from the battlefield. But because Fei Long realizes now she's out of the picture, his attention immediately shifts away from Iron Man himself and to Emma Frost, because Tony Stark introduces an idea that Fei Long hadn't thought of, right? I'm Tony Stark here in my normal human form in the middle of the street. If you kill an Avenger out here for the world to see, you would be dead by dawn. Because sure, humanity doesn't like the mutant population, but humanity loves the Avengers. It would be political suicide to do something like this. So Fei Long ultimately kind of has to let him go. And in fact, this is further complicated when Captain America arrives on the scene. Because if Fei Long were to kill Captain America in the eyes of the public, any popularity out there that Orcus and Fei Long have is gone, right? It disappears. That's it. Because the public loves Captain America. They cherish Captain America. He's not a guy you just take out and the public just kind of shrugs it off and says, well, you know, I mean, collateral damage, right? That's just kind of the way it goes. No. And so when Tony Stark makes his way down into what are effectively the Morlock tunnels, I'll explain those here in a second, it's essentially revealed to us that the Iron Man suit had flown all the way down this far underground in order to keep Emma Frost safe. Now, the Morlock tunnels, for those of you guys who don't know, and if you do know, just bear with me here for a second, but the Morlock tunnels were part and parcel to the Morlocks themselves. Historically in Marvel Comics, mutants have all kinds of different powers and appearances, but most of them look like Emma Frost. They just look like regular people, and you would never know the difference between a mutant and a regular human being. But the Morlocks were mutants that had powers or physical appearances or both that were so extreme they couldn't function on the surface world. Because of their appearance, they would immediately be targeted by humanity. And so not really being welcomed into the traditional Xavier Institute, or at least not believing in the X-Men's cause, they took up residence underground. Now, once Krakoa became a thing and the doors were open to all mutants across the world, yeah, the Morlocks abandoned the tunnels, they took off to the island, and now they're one of the 250,000 mutants that's been shuffled off to some in-between place between dimensions, and Exodus is leading them into what's basically going to probably be their own demise or their own saving. We don't really know. But the thing about this is that as Iron Man and Emma Frost have this discussion, something to know, she doesn't know that the attack on Krakoa has happened. She's totally unaware of that. Her attention has been focused on the Sentinels and Iron Man this whole time. And so Tony Stark shows her his phone that's all cracked and broken and everything, but it's literally the headline from the Daily Bugle, "The Mutant Massacre, No Human Survivors." Not only that, where Orcus had published this whole piece through the Daily Bugle in saying that the medicines that Krakoa was providing to humanity to wipe out any kind of mental illness or to expand their lifespan or cure any disease, that they were actually laced, and that it was kind of a backdoor way for the mutant population to kill humanity. It was one part true, but it was one part false. Orcus laced those medicines. They basically put the X-Men in a situation to where they would look like villains, or at least the mutant population, they would look like bad guys. And so Emma Frost is now in this position where, as far as she's concerned, she's the only surviving mutant that's out there. And even when she uses her telepathy to scan for the Stepford Cuckoos, right? In essence, the teenage clones of her, she can't find them. She refers to them as like her daughters, but they're really more clones than anything else. But it's a really crushing moment here. Now, a legitimate question has to be asked. In the moment when Orcus forced Charles Xavier to use his telepathy to make every mutant on Earth leave Earth and then travel through the Krakoan gates to wherever their destination took them, but some of those mutants were able to override the influence of that power using a kind of backdoor protocol that Xavier had installed in their minds to override a command like that. If something like this were to happen, did it affect Emma Frost? And the answer seems to be no, but we're not really given an explanation why. We don't know if it's because she was encased in the Iron Man suit and she was this far underground, or the command was simply just not sent to her. We're not entirely sure. I would go so far as to argue it's the first. One of the protocols that Tony Stark built into the Iron Man suit is to shield it from telepathic influence, much in the same way that Magneto's helmet protects him from telepathic attack. So that seems to make the most sense. And so what Stark does is he says the entire mutant population is being hunted. Some mutants basically manage to survive on Earth by whatever manner and whatever means. We're not entirely sure. Again, the other part of that whole thing with the X-Men is it did seem to be limited to Krakoa itself, but there were other mutants in other parts of the world that passed through the gate. So again, it's a little kind of inconsistent in terms of how it was handled by Marvel. But he literally tells her, they're hunting for you and they will find you. These Sentinels cannot be reasoned with. You can't bargain with them. As soon as they locate you, they will try to kill you. And I promise you, this Stark tech is evolving and growing under the control of Fei Long and Orcus to where it will overcome your diamond form and it will kill you. Right? So stay here underground. I will come back and I will give you what you need, information, something along those lines. And so in order to really kind of get Fei Long off his trail, and with Fei Long unaware of the fact that Stark and Emma are still working together, one of the things to remember is that when the whole instance of Fei Long taking over Stark Industries happened, that Tony Stark had reached out to Jennifer Walters, right, to She-Hulk, who's an attorney. And one of the few instances of Marvel when she actually serves a purpose, she had operated as the lawyer of Tony Stark. And in this instance, instance where he's talking to her, she tells him, your best bet here is to basically just hand the armor over, right? Hand the suit over to Fei Long and just walk away. It's what he wants. And even if you have some kind of scheme operating behind the scenes, at the very least, it'll buy you time. The other part of this is that in an effort to get to Tony Stark, Fei Long targeted the people close to him. Specifically, he went after James Rhodes because what he knows is that Stark will go to the ends of the earth to protect his friend. And so in this moment, Stark realizes handing over the suit really is the best alternative. And he does it in the most interesting way ever, where he literally just throws it through the front of the building where it shatters the glass window. Now, one of the things about this, and I think it's one of the great ideas that they did with this character, he passes by a liquor store and he's almost inclined to indulge in alcohol. Because for those of you guys who aren't really familiar with the inner workings of Tony Stark, there was a story called Demon in a Bottle where it was literally just focusing on his battle with alcoholism. It was a phenomenal story. It was really cool the way that it was done, but it's something that he's always struggled with as a character. He's always struggled with alcohol addiction and so on. And so it's one of these instances where it'd be very easy for him to relapse. Instead, what he does is he basically goes and just kind of gets little bits and bobs here and there that allows him to create a kind of disguise and then brings it to Emma Frost. And so this is how it is that Emma Frost ends up getting that disguise that we saw in like Uncanny Avengers and so on, where she's walking around looking like somebody else. The other part of this is Stark's still reeling from his fight with the Sentinels. And I wouldn't go so far as to say that he's dying, but I will go so far as to say that his body's struggling. And so what happens is Emma Frost enters into his mind in order to allow him the opportunity to communicate intelligently and adequately without like struggling with the physical ailments that are plaguing him. And what they do is they actually strike a deal. And it's one of the best things that they could have done. They build off of what Typhoid Mary and Kingpin had done. That with Tony Stark being somebody that's worked alongside the X-Men for so long, they decide to get married. And the reason for this is that what it does is with Emma Frost's assets, all of her money basically being frozen by the federal government due to the fact that she's a mutant, if the two of them get married, there's no warrant per se out for Tony Stark. There is one for Emma Frost. And while he is willing to, at least as he describes it, earn the Interpol warrant, for right now, that's not out there. So them being married provides all of the benefits of a married couple. In essence, because he needs to build more Iron Man suits, but he has no capital to do so. Remember, in the time that Emma Frost has been alive, due to her telepathy and any number of things, she's amassed a fortune. It would allow her to take her money and transfer it to Tony Stark's accounts. And in turn, he can operate and build whatever Iron Man suits he needs with impunity. And so he gives her a wedding band. They're essentially engaged. Again, there's no real love here, but it's one of the smartest moves they could have done. Use the legal system in their favor. So again, it's what happens when you take two people who are pretty intelligent and allow them to work together. More so than that, what she ends up doing is saying, we need to go to a place where we can find safe haven, where we can find like-minded people that we can work alongside that will help us achieve their goals, or at least our goals, and in turn will also help with their resources. And they go to the Hellfire Club. Now, the Hellfire Club, for those of you guys who don't know, it's one of the coolest things in Marvel Comics. It's a coming together of some of the wealthiest and most influential people in the world. Not everybody, but those who traditionally have their sights set on influencing the world as opposed to conquering it, right? So to use a really good example here, they don't want to be the people who were finding gold in the Great Gold Rush back in the day. They want to be the ones who were selling the pickaxes and the shovels, because those are the people who are making the money. Maybe a prospector finds gold, but you're guaranteed to get rich selling the tools that they use to try to find gold. So again, it's a really smart maneuver in terms of how the Hellfire Club works. More so than that, what she does is she introduces him to the White King of the Hellfire Club, basically the second most powerful person there. The White Queen would be the most powerful, but they're basically two of the most capable people. And we end up finding out the person that's going to help them do everything they need to do in order to take out Orcus and try to help influence the return of rights to the mutant population on Earth is Wilson Fisk, Kingpin. I told you he was important. With that being said, guys, we're going to bring this to an end. If you need to get caught up on Fall of X, make sure you click this link to the playlist, and I will catch you all later. Peace.